The golden hues of the setting sun painted the Manhwa estate in Ethelgard, but the light within its walls seemed to emanate from a different source entirely, the lingering afterglow of Ezekiel's temple demonstration. Word, like wildfire fueled by disbelief and awe, had already swept through the manor. Servants, usually bustling with efficient anonymity, now moved with a palpable, almost reverent quietude, their gazes lingering on the small, 6-year-old Lord Ezekiel with a mixture of fear and profound respect. The handful of minor nobles who had witnessed the spectacle at the temple had departed in a state of stunned silence, their initial skepticism replaced by fervent, if slightly bewildered, pronouncements of the Manhwa family's blessed fortune. In the kitchen, the cook, a stout woman named Marta, murmured to her assistant, "Did you see it? The light, like Adlor himself, had descended." The assistant, a nervous youth, could only nod, still pale. And the words, "The goddess Xylos, unheard of." Upstairs, in Ezekiel's chambers, the young servant girl, Elara, who had initially reported the scribbles on the wall, was attempting a valiant, yet ultimately futile, task. Armed with a damp cloth and a determined expression, she scrubbed at the charcoal marks Ezekiel had made on his bedroom wall. SWOT analysis, unsubmicals, Xylos mad. The bizarre, pseudo-scientific scrawls stubbornly clung to the plaster, resisting her efforts. With each futile wipe, the charcoal seemed to deepen its impression, as if the wall itself had absorbed the profundity of the tiny lord's thoughts. Elara finally threw up her hands in exasperation, muttering, "It's like the wall wants to remember it. Some powerful magic, this must be." She left a faint grey smudge on the otherwise pristine white wall, a testament to her failure and the strange, inexplicable persistence of Ezekiel's writing. Meanwhile, Lord Riel Manhwa, Count of Ethelgard and High Priest of Adlor, was wrestling with a seismic shift in his worldview. He sat in his study, a goblet of fine Viridian wine untouched before him, his gaze fixed on the flickering flame of a glow globe. The image of Ezekiel, bathed in golden light, creating a granite sotoba from thin air, then conjuring a colossal, animated statue of Xylos, played on an endless loop in his mind. Xylos, he murmured aloud, tasting the name. Not Adlor, the sun god he had worshipped his entire life, whose laws he had promulgated, whose name he had invoked in blessings and battle. But Xylos, the goddess of the universe, the true architect of existence, as explained by his 6-year-old son, who spoke of unsubmicals and particle conversion as casually as Riel discussed crop rotations. A profound sense of clarity, sharp as a honed blade, sliced through Riel's traditional piety. Adlor was the sun, yes, important, a giver of light. But Xylos was the source. Adlor was a function within a system created by Xylos. His son, Ezekiel, had not just performed magic, he had revealed the underlying code of their reality. The arbitrary rules and limited understanding of their current religion felt suddenly antiquated, akin to trying to understand a complex clockwork mechanism by only looking at the hands. Riel chuckled, a low, almost incredulous sound. "A genius. A true genius. And mine." His mind raced, mapping out the strategic implications. This wasn't just about a gifted child, it was about an unprecedented, almost terrifying, strategic advantage. Permanent stone structures for fortifications. A direct, if baffling, line to the true divine power. A son who spoke of optimizing the world. The shift from Adlor to Xylos, he realized, wasn't heresy, it was an upgrade. It was a pathway to unprecedented power and legitimacy for the Manhwa family, positioning them not just as regional lords, but as favored agents of the cosmic architect herself. He had been a passive ruler, relying on natural barriers and reactive defense. Ezekiel was proposing a proactive, foundational change. "Send Ezekiel to my study," he commanded a nearby guard, his voice firm, resonating with a new resolve. Immediately. Minutes later, a small, dark-haired figure entered, his golden eyes wide and innocent, but holding a familiar, unsettling depth. Ezekiel, dressed in a fresh tunic, clutched a wooden toy soldier, examining it with meticulous focus. "Papa!" Ezekiel chirped, his child's voice a stark contrast to the gravitas of the room. Lord Riel knelt, bringing himself to Ezekiel's eye level. He placed a hand gently on his son's shoulder. "Ezekiel," he began, his voice softer than usual, "what you showed us today, it was truly remarkable. Beyond anything I have ever witnessed. Your connection to the divine is profound." Ezekiel nodded, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "Yes, Papa. I told you about the unsubmicals. They're like tiny, tiny bits of everything. They're very restless in this world. They want to change." He paused, looking at his toy soldier. "Like this man. He's made of unsubmicals, but they are staying together. But the air around us, Papa, its unsubmicals are very jumpy. They want to be different things." Lord Riel listened, his brow furrowing slightly. He nodded sagely, stroking his chin. "Unsubmicals. Jumpy bits. Indeed, my son. Restless. Wanting to change." He feigned understanding, recalling similar, equally baffling pronouncements from Ezekiel about data and optimizing the protein output. He saw the genuine, brilliant spark in Ezekiel's eyes, even if the words were utter gibberish to his mortal ears. He would simply translate it as divine energy or magical essence. Ezekiel, encouraged, continued. "And when I make stone, Papa, I take the jumpy unsubmicals from the air, and I make them stable. Like the man here," he gestured to his toy. "I make them into stone unsubmicals. And they like being stone unsubmicals, so they stay." He paused, reaching out a tiny hand and making a complex, almost imperceptible gesture in the air. "It's particle conversion, Papa. Like changing one kind of data file into another, but with physical matter. It needs precise command lines." Lord Riel blinked. Particle conversion. Data files. Command lines. He maintained his serene, understanding expression, though inwardly he was battling a rising tide of cosmic confusion. He simply nodded more vigorously. "Ah, yes. Precise, command lines. I understand, my son. Truly, your insight is beyond measure." He stood up, placing both hands on Ezekiel's shoulders. "This is why, Ezekiel, your unique understanding will be invaluable. You spoke of walls that would not crumble. And of feeding our people more efficiently. These are tasks worthy of our focus." Ezekiel's golden eyes brightened. "Yes, Papa. We need protein optimization. And a robust firewall for the city's perimeter. Not just the physical layers, but the metaphysical ones too. We need to secure the entire network topology." Lord Riel patted his son's head, a faint, resigned smile on his face. Protein optimization. Firewall. Network topology. He still didn't understand the words, but he understood the intent. His son was a force, a strange, brilliant, bewildering force. "Indeed, my son. We shall begin. Together, we shall build a future that is optimized. And impervious." He looked at the unblinking, serious gaze of his child, and felt a thrill of both apprehension and exhilarating possibility. The world, he realized, was about to be remade, not by divine decree from above, but by the meticulous, albeit comically phrased, plans of a 6-year-old programmer. As the last echoes of the manor's revelry faded into the quiet hum of the Viridian night, Ezekiel's small body settled into a profound, almost programmatic slumber. But within, the true work was just beginning. His consciousness, now unshackled from the limitations of his 6-year-old meat suit, expanded into the crystal-clear realm of his lucid sleep. This was his true operating environment, where unsubmicals vibrated with predictable logic and the complexities of cosmic management could be processed at optimal clock speed. First item on the mental agenda, Xylo's appeasement, high priority, wife management. Ping, ping, ping. The mental notifications from Xylos, usually a low, persistent hum of divine pestering, were currently a series of satisfied purrs, like a well-fed cat. System status, green, Ezekiel mentally noted, reviewing the sensory feedback from his connection to the goddess. Her contentment from his public display and fervent praise had filled her adoration metrics to near overflow capacity. Input parameters, over-the-top flattery, direct validation of omnipotence, implied future worship. Output: reduced divine irritability, temporary cessation of existential crises. He conjured a mental divine Siam interface, a glowing, ephemeral screen only he could see. On it, Xylos's profile bloomed, complete with an ego saturation bar currently at 98%. Excellent, he mused. But short-term gains are unsustainable without a long-term strategy. A mental representation of Xylos, a slightly less haughty, more pleased version, shimmered into being before him. Little soul, mental Xylos purred, her golden eyes twinkling. That was a most satisfactory broadcast. My glory was made manifest. You do understand me? Ezekiel internally cringed. Oh, goddess, the cringe is real even in my mind. Yes, goddess, he projected back, mentally adding another layer of sycophantic deference. Your magnificent glory knows no bounds. This humble servant merely facilitated the necessary data transfer to your loyal subjects. Data transfer, mental Xylos mused, a faint frown creasing her perfect brow before smoothing out. Such peculiar terms. But the feeling. It was exquisite. More potent than 1,000, well, you know. Precisely, Ezekiel thought. Raw energy versus refined data packets. She's a low-resolution display, but a powerful one. He began designing the automated praise feed system. It needed to be constant, consistent, and, most importantly, unobtrusive to his own focus. Daily affirmations. Bi-hourly tributes. Hourly existential validation. All via scheduled mental whispers. Set up a cron job for divine flattery. No more manual ping requests for adoration. He internally categorized Xylos's previous attempts to contact him as unauthorized divine ping requests, a nuisance he was determined to firewall off. This will keep the primary user occupied and reduce unscheduled interrupts. Next, the standardized Viridian script, medium priority, font face project. His mental screen shifted, displaying an array of chaotic Viridian characters. Each stroke seemed to waver, to suggest multiple interpretations. His earthly programmer's soul recoiled. This is a nightmare, he thought. No defined character set. No consistent rendering. How do they even compile basic records? He mentally summoned a wizened, perpetually bewildered Viridian scribe, old Master Orlo, from the manhwa library. Master Orlo, Ezekiel mentally projected, attempting a tone of respectful inquiry regarding the script. Why does Ezekiel appear differently each time it is written? Mental Orlo blinked, his mental quill pausing mid-air. But young lord, the mental projection replied, that is the beauty of it. It carries the spirit of the scribe. It is expression. Expression is good for art, Master Orlo, Ezekiel internally sighed, but terrible for data integrity. We need a universal character encoding. Something scalable. A consistent font face. Imagine trying to build a search engine with this chaos. Mental Orlo merely scratched his mental head. A search engine? What arcane device is that, young lord? Is it for finding lost socks? Ezekiel pinched the bridge of his non-existent nose. No, Master Orlo. It's for finding information. Efficiently. We need a standardized Unicode equivalent, not a Bayesian variant with optional, random flourishes. This is a severe legacy system bottleneck. He began mentally sketching out a grid-based character map, meticulously defining stroke orders and proportions. This font face project is crucial. Without it, the entire data transfer system remains fluid. And fluid, in coding, means bugs. Switching gears, initiate animal husbandry, high priority, protein optimization. His mental display now showed a crude, animated loop of manhwa hunters chasing a wild, scrawny boar through a dense forest. Inefficient, he critiqued. High energy expenditure, unpredictable yield. Suboptimal protein acquisition. He brought up a mental Lord Riel, who was currently reviewing hypothetical battlefield maps, a stern expression on his face. Papa, Ezekiel mentally began, regarding the biounits currently populating our vast exterior sectors. Their current deployment strategies, uncontained. This impacts resource harvesting negatively. Mental Riel frowned. Bio-units? You mean the stag's son? The wild game. Precisely, Papa. We must transition from a hunter-gatherer food acquisition model to a sustained-yield, self-replicating food source model. This significantly reduces risk exposure and increases protein optimization per capita. He showed a mental projection of a neatly fenced pasture filled with plump, docile cows. Mental Riel's eyes widened. Fenced cows? Continuously? Without the hunt? He looked genuinely baffled but intrigued. That changes everything. It changes the economic efficiency metrics by a factor of X, Ezekiel stated, mentally calculating a complex formula only he could comprehend. He then mentally added a note: must avoid explaining exponential growth too early. Might cause system overload. He also mentally shuddered at the thought of the inevitable hands-on component. I'll need to calibrate my clumsy child's subroutine for proper handling of living bio-units. Manual labor, the smell, the squishy bits. Finally, physical conditioning and magic training, ongoing, meat suit calibration. He mentally scanned his own physical form, a detailed holographic projection of his internal systems. He saw the unsubmical pathways glowing, the nascent neural networks forming. Current processing power, suboptimal, he internally grumbled. Latency issues during active magic casting. Fine motor control, still in alpha testing. My brain is a quantum supercomputer, but this body is a first-generation abacus. He mentally pulled up a diagnostics report. Low clock speed, insufficient RM, poor peripheral integration when awake. He imagined his child's hands fumbling a simple task, like tying a knot, only to have his mind effortlessly compute the perfect sequence of movements. It's like having a top-tier GPU running on a potato CPU. The lag is excruciating. He began a series of mental calisthenics, directing unsubmicals through his simulated muscles, observing their perfect, fluid movements. He compared it to his waking efforts, where a simple stretch often resulted in an awkward wobble or an unexpected tumble. We need to recalibrate this meat suit for optimal performance. Reduce the clumsiness coefficient. Avoid buffer overflows during high-intensity magic. No more accidental self-trips during critical moments. The goal is seamless user experience, not unexpected physics simulations. He visualized his own internal data flow, ensuring that the vast knowledge from Roche's training was being properly integrated and indexed, ready for instant access when his physical brain matured enough to handle the sheer volume. Akashic records online. Data transfer successful. Now for the system optimization. As the first faint streaks of dawn began to touch the windows of his room, Ezekiel's consciousness gently receded from the luminous, logical precision of his lucid dream. The mental screens dissolved, the internal dialogues faded, leaving only the quiet hum of a perfectly organized mind, ready to tackle the glorious, bewildering, and often comically clumsy realities of his new life. The first rays of dawn, hesitant and golden, pierced through the high windows of Ezekiel's chamber. His eyes fluttered open, not with the typical grogginess of a child, but with the crisp clarity of a system reboot. He stretched, a deep, satisfying sensation rippling through his small limbs. Meat suit calibration, 10% complete, he mentally assessed. He felt lighter, more agile. His muscles, usually stiff upon waking, responded with a surprising fluidity. Finally, he mumbled, a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, intending a graceful dismount, a testament to his nocturnal unsubmical channeling. Instead, his foot caught on a stray corner of his sheepskin rug, sending him tumbling forward with an undignified oof. He landed in a heap, his mental gracefulness algorithm clearly still requiring significant debugging. Physical integration, still in alpha testing, he muttered, scrambling to his feet. The inherent clumsiness of a 6-year-old body, combined with his mind's expectation of adult coordination, remained a constant, vexing bug. He straightened his tunic with a sigh, deciding to prioritize mental tasks over physical grandstanding for the morning. The first, most pressing non-Xylos-related item on his mental backlog was the standardized Viridian script, medium priority, font face project. The thought of the chaotic, free-form writing system grated on his Earth programmer's soul. It was an aesthetic affront and a data integrity nightmare. After a quick, if still slightly wobbly, trek to the breakfast hall, where he managed to only spill half his milk, a marked improvement, Ezekiel sought out the head scribe, Old Master Orlo. Orlo was a man of meticulous habits, known for his beautiful, if inconsistent, calligraphy, and his perpetually bewildered expression whenever Ezekiel spoke. He found Orlo hunched over a wax tablet in the manor's small, dust-mote-filled scriptorium, painstakingly etching a genealogical record. "Master Orlo," Ezekiel piped up, his voice clear. "I require your assistance with a critical system upgrade." Orlo nearly dropped his stylus. He squinted at the small lord. "Lord Ezekiel? System upgrade? Has the cook invented a new recipe?" Ezekiel shook his head. "No, Master Orlo. This pertains to the font face project. Your current rendering of glyphs lacks standardization." Orlo's brow furrowed. "Glyphs? Rendering? Lord Ezekiel, I am merely recording the family history. My hand is true, my eye precise." "Indeed," Ezekiel conceded. "Your manual input is impressive. However, the output consistency is suboptimal across multiple instances. Observe." Ezekiel pointed a small finger at the tablet, indicating where Orlo had just written the name manhwa. Here, them has a sweeping flourish. On another scroll, he recalled a memory from the library, it was a sharp angle. And yesterday, on the decree for the new tax, it was almost a circle. This creates data parsing errors and cross-platform compatibility issues. Orlo's eyes glazed over. "But, it is expression, young lord. The spirit of the scribe." Ezekiel resisted the urge to pinch his non-existent nose. "Expression is acceptable for artistic front-end displays, Master Orlo, but for back-end data storage and mass reproduction, it is a severe impediment. Imagine trying to query a database where every entry uses a different character encoding. It leads to system instability." Orlo merely blinked. "Database? Query? Is this some new form of sorcery, Lord Ezekiel?" Ezekiel sighed internally. Explaining SQL to a medieval scribe. This is going to be a long development cycle. "No, Master Orlo. It is about efficiency. We need a universal character set. A consistent visual representation for each alphanumeric symbol." He then mentally pulled up his planned grid-based character map. Each letter, each symbol, must conform to a defined pixel density and stroke weight. Like this. He made a complex, precise gesture in the air, his fingers mimicking the exact curves and angles he envisioned for the new standardized M. His physical hand, however, merely twitched clumsily, making a childish grabbing motion. Orlo stared at the twitching hand, then back at the wall of scribbles in Ezekiel's room that he'd failed to clean. A dawning, horrified realization crept over him. "Lord Ezekiel, are you suggesting we relearn how to write? All of us?" "Precisely," Ezekiel declared, missing the scribe's growing panic. "It will improve readability, search functionality, and allow for scalable information dissemination. Eventually, we can even implement text compression algorithms." Orlo paled. "Text compression?" He looked as though Ezekiel had suggested boiling the entire library. This was the core problem. Wax tablets were fine for individual practice, but for a standardized, scalable script, they were woefully inadequate. They melted, they smeared, they were bulky. For true, scalable information dissemination, he needed a proper medium. Ping! New mental notification, critical dependency detected, medium. Paper production module required for font face project deployment. Ezekiel's mental display immediately shifted from character grids to raw material supply chains. Paper. Real paper. Not crude parchment or thick, brittle vellum, but the smooth, uniform, mass-producible sheets he remembered from Earth. The kind that could hold ink without bleeding, be folded without cracking, and allow for efficient, double-sided printing. He frowned. Viridia, for all its magic, was technologically stunted. Their limited writing materials and counting systems were glaring evidence of forgotten knowledge. Creating paper, modern paper, would require not just new materials, but entirely new processes. Pulping, bleaching, pressing, drying. This wasn't about nudging unsubmicals, this was industrial revolution stuff, shrunk to a 6-year-old scale. Constraint check, current tech level, pre-industrial. Required tech level, industrial revolution basic. Delta, significant. Master Orlo, Ezekiel began, his voice suddenly very serious, ignoring the scribe's stunned silence. Do we have trees? Orlo blinked, bewildered by the abrupt shift. Trees, young lord? Of course. The great forest extends for days to the north and west. Why? And fibrous plants. Ezekiel continued, picturing cellulose. Like long, stringy reeds? Or rags? Do we have many rags? Orlo stammered, rags? Lord Ezekiel, we use rags for cleaning, of course. And reeds grow by the river. But what does this have to do with writing? Ezekiel's golden eyes gleamed with intense focus. Everything, Master Orlo. Everything. This font face project needs a new storage medium. A flexible, lightweight data substrate. We need to invent paper. And for that, we need trees. Lots of trees. Or, failing that, an ample supply of what you call rags. Orlo stared, his mouth slightly agape. Paper? From rags? Trees? This child was not merely gifted. He was utterly, magnificently mad. Or truly divine. The thought of a 6-year-old inventing paper from scratch was so outlandish, so far beyond his comprehension, that all he could do was nod slowly, a bewildered smile pasted on his face. Yes, young lord, Orlo finally managed to croak. Trees and rags. I will look into it. He escaped the scriptorium with a speed surprising for his age, leaving Ezekiel to contemplate the daunting material acquisition and processing phase of his new project. This wasn't just a font, it was a revolution. And he was going to need a lot of wood pulp. Fresh from his bewildering, yet strangely productive, conversation with Master Orlo, Ezekiel's small legs carried him with renewed purpose towards his father's study. The paper production module had achieved critical dependency status in his mental project management system, overriding all other, less immediate concerns. Lord Riel, ever the dedicated patriarch, was still at his large oak desk, poring over land deeds, a faint frown creasing his brow. Papa! Ezekiel chirped, marching directly to the desk with the unreserved confidence of a child, and perhaps a CEO. Lord Riel looked up, startled. Ezekiel? What brings you here, my son? Are you well? He still felt a lingering sense of awe and a touch of trepidation from their earlier talk. Ezekiel. I'm calling him Ezekiel now, not Isekay. The realization was a subtle flicker in his mind, a quiet acknowledgement of the transformation he was witnessing in his child and the growing reverence he felt. Yes, Papa. My meat suit calibration is progressing nicely. But I have a new priority task for the Manhwa corporate entity. Ezekiel announced, reaching up to tap his father's knee. We need to initiate the paper production module immediately for the font face project deployment. Lord Riel blinked. Paper production module? What is this, my son? It's the new data substrate for our scalable information dissemination system, Ezekiel explained, his golden eyes gleaming with excitement. Master Orlo is currently limited by the wax tablet legacy system. It lacks write endurance and mass reproducibility. To create a universal character set, we require a superior storage medium. Lord Riel, familiar with his son's peculiar vocabulary, nodded slowly, piecing together the gist. A new way to write. Better than wax. But how? From trees, Papa. Ezekiel declared, as if stating the obvious. We perform cellulose extraction from woody biomass. He made vigorous chopping motions with his small hands. Then mechanical and chemical pulping, that's breaking it down into tiny, tiny fibers, followed by water removal via hydraulic compression and thermal drying processes. It creates a flat, thin, flexible data sheet with excellent ink adhesion properties and double-sided print capability. He gestured broadly, imagining an entire paper mill. Lord Riel's eyes widened. You mean, we can take trees and turn them into thin sheets for writing? Permanently? Like the finest parchment, but lighter? Precisely, Papa. Much more cost-effective and resource-efficient than current methods, Ezekiel affirmed. For this, we will need raw material procurement personnel for biomass harvesting, processing technicians for pulp conversion, and quality control specialists for the final data substrate inspection. He paused, tapping his chin thoughtfully. How do we compensate our human resources here, Papa? What is the standard daily wage unit for General Laboris? Lord Riel, accustomed to these abrupt shifts, considered. A copper piece, perhaps, for a day's honest work. Or two, for skilled hands. He reached into a small leather pouch on his belt and pulled out a single, gleaming copper coin, placing it on the desk. This is our standard. Why do you ask, Ezekiel? Ezekiel's eyes fixated on the coin. It was simple, round, with a crude stamping of Adlor's sun on one side. Material composition, copper alloy. Molecular structure, observable. This was it. The moment. His molecular replication module was ready for its first real-world stress test. He picked up the coin, examining it closely. Lord Riel watched, curious. Ezekiel closed his golden eyes for a moment, a faint, almost imperceptible golden glow emanating from his small hand. He wasn't thinking in words, but in intricate, pulsating patterns of energy and matter. His mind, unburdened by the physical world in this brief moment of intense concentration, identified the precise atomic structure of the copper, the subtle impurities, the specific arrangement of its molecules. It was a perfect, instantaneous scan. Then, with a gentle pop barely louder than a whisper, a second copper coin appeared, identical in every way, nestled in his palm beside the first. And then another. And another. And another. Within seconds, a small, shimmering pile of copper coins accumulated on the desk, spilling over and clattering softly onto the polished wood. Lord Riel's jaw dropped. His eyes, usually shrewd and calculating, were wide with an almost comical disbelief. He stared at the ever-growing pile of coins, then at Ezekiel's small, innocent face, then back at the coins. By Adlor's blazing light, he stammered, scrambling back in his chair, overturning a small inkwell in his shock. What is this, Ezekiel? Ezekiel, startled by his father's sudden outburst and the spilled ink, blinked. His hand, no longer glowing, paused its replication. Oh! Oops, he said, his child's voice carrying a genuine note of surprise. He looked at the mountain of copper coins, then at his father's aghast expression. I forgot. I meant to keep that in the restricted access module, Papa. My impulse control subroutine is still in development. He pointed a finger to his temple. Rosh, he gave me this idea. It's just molecular replication. I identify the molecular structure, and then I copy and paste it. Like copying text on a scroll, but with actual matter. Lord Riel stared at the ink stain on his pristine desk, then at the ridiculous pile of coins, then back at his son, who looked genuinely remorseful for his oversight. The pieces clicked into place, not just the coins, but the entire, bewildering puzzle of his son. The unshakable confidence. The inexplicable knowledge. The impossible magic. This was not just a gift, it was an infinite wellspring. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his mind racing through possibilities. Infinite wealth. Unrivaled resources. The Manhwa family could fund armies, build cities, buy loyalty, outlast any famine, reshape the very economy of Viridia. The strategic advantage he'd mused about earlier was no longer just about defenses, it was absolute, undeniable supremacy. Lord Riel composed himself, his voice now a low, intense rumble, tinged with a new, profound reverence. Ezekiel, he said, pushing aside the spilled ink, this power must remain a secret. An absolute, inviolable secret, understood only by you, and now, by me. Do you understand? His son's small nod was solemn. Good. You shall have the trees, my son. You shall have all the manpower you need. This changes everything. My son, you truly are a blessing beyond measure. He looked at the copper coins, no longer seeing mere currency, but the endless potential they represented. Ezekiel, relieved, then furrowed his brow in thought. Excellent, Papa. For the paper production module and related industrial operations, we'll need a suitable facility location. It requires proximity to woody biomass for material input, a reliable water source for processing and effluent dispersal, and sufficient seclusion to minimize environmental impact and auditory pollution to the main settlement. A place where the resource extraction doesn't interfere with the residential user experience. Lord Riel, still reeling from the coin incident, managed a weak smile. Environmental impact. Auditory pollution. The boy truly thought in strange terms. But the logic was sound. The old mill site, Ezekiel, he suggested, leaning back in his chair, a newfound, weary but triumphant glint in his eye. By the eastern bend of the Ethel River. It's been abandoned for generations, but the river still runs strong there, and it's well away from the village. Isolated, as you say. Perfect for your industrial operations. Ezekiel's face lit up. Excellent, Papa. The Ethel River processing plant it is. We can begin Phase 1, resource acquisition tomorrow. Lord Riel merely nodded, watching his son's small figure exit the study. He then looked at the pile of copper coins, scooped one up, and weighed it in his hand. Identical. Flawless. He smiled, a slow, predatory grin. The world, indeed, was about to be remade. And the Manhwa family would be at the very top of the new, optimized, paper-rich, and infinitely wealthy, food-secure, network-protected hierarchy. The next morning, the grand hall of the Manhwa Manor buzzed with an unusual energy. Lord Riel, radiating an almost manic enthusiasm, had assembled a diverse group of his household staff, the gruff head guard, Borin, a cluster of burly lumberjacks, their axes gleaming, several keen-eyed hunters, and a contingent of the manor's general laborers, looking bewildered but eager for new tasks. Ezekiel, standing beside his father, looked impossibly small but exuded an aura of intense focus, occasionally whispering technical directives that only Riel seemed to vaguely comprehend. My loyal people! Lord Riel boomed, his voice echoing through the hall. We embark on a new venture. A monumental undertaking that will bring unprecedented prosperity to the Manhwa household. My son, Ezekiel, has envisioned a way to create a new material for writing, lighter, more abundant, than anything seen before. This paper will revolutionize our records, our communication, our very understanding. Borin, the head guard, stepped forward. My lord, with all due respect, what exactly is this paper? And what role do we play? Excellent query, Borin. Ezekiel piped up, his voice unexpectedly clear for a child. You, and your biomass acquisition specialists, he gestured to the lumberjacks, will be responsible for cellulose fiber procurement. The lumberjacks exchanged confused glances. One burly man, Grizz, scratched his bearded chin. Cellulose, what, little lord? Trees. Ezekiel clarified, somewhat impatiently, realizing his earthly terminology wasn't quite translating. We need trees. Not too many at first, just for initial resource sampling and facility calibration. He held up 3 small fingers. 3 trees. Tall ones. With ample woody biomass. 3 trees. Grizz grunted, bewildered. Lord Ezekiel, we fell 3 trees before breakfast. For lumber, we usually take down a score or more in a day. This is not for lumber, Grizz, Lord Riel interjected, catching the gist. This is for paper. Go to the Great Forest, beyond the eastern bend, where the trees are plentiful and mature. Select 3 strong pines. And most crucially, Riel paused, turning to Ezekiel for confirmation, you must bring them to the old mill site. The logs. And their bark. The bark is vital. Ezekiel nodded vigorously. Yes. The bark must be segregated by species for material analysis and quality control testing in the future. pine bark in one pile, oak bark in another, and so on. We need to identify optimal fiber characteristics for different product lines. The lumberjacks looked at each other, then back at the stern Lord Riel, then at the intense 6-year-old demanding bark segregation. Different piles for different barks. Then, little Lord Grizz mumbled, clearly humoring the child but obeying the count. We'll have it at the mill in 3 days, as you ordered. Excellent. The Ethel River processing plant will be ready for Phase 1, resource acquisition by then, Ezekiel confirmed, as if giving a final deadline to a team of engineers. Lord Riel simply smiled, his expression a mask of proud, if slightly bewildered, support. He knew better than to question his son's methods, especially now. He just needed to ensure the manpower and resources were in place. And with the endless supply of copper coins he could now generate, resources were certainly not an issue. As the lumberjacks headed towards the forest, Ezekiel, accompanied by a handful of general laborers, mostly to carry his tools, a small satchel containing a few curious lumps of rock and metal which he himself had conjured previously for testing, and which looked suspiciously like discarded river stones to the laborers, set off for the old mill. The site was indeed secluded, a weathered stone structure crumbling amidst overgrown weeds, its ancient water wheel long since rotted away. Suboptimal infrastructure, Ezekiel muttered, surveying the dilapidated building with a critical eye. Structural integrity requires immediate reinforcement protocols. Water flow for processing is adequate, but effluent dispersal needs dedicated channeling. The laborers, used to clearing rubble or patching roofs, looked at the decrepit mill with dismay. Lord Ezekiel, this place is falling apart, one exclaimed. It will take weeks just to make it safe. Ezekiel simply gave them a look that suggested their estimation metrics were laughably inefficient. Inefficient resource allocation. We will utilize molecular reconstruction and particle reassembly to expedite structural renovation. He walked into the shell of the mill, his golden eyes scanning every crack and loose stone. He touched a crumbling wall, his small hand radiating a faint, internal glow. He wasn't thinking about mortar and brick, but about the very unsubmicals within the aged stone. His mind, unburdened by a child's weak grip, effortlessly identified the molecular structure of sturdy, unblemished granite. With a soft hum, almost a sigh of profound concentration, he began to replicate it, filling in the gaps. He made columns of solid stone erupt from the floor, bracing the walls. Cracks vanished, replaced by seamless, smooth rock. The mill's outer shell solidified, strengthened, transformed. Next, the interior. We require pulping vats for cellulose maceration, Ezekiel declared, marching to a cleared section of the floor. He visualized enormous, perfectly circular stone vats, capable of holding vast quantities of wood pulp and water. He then manifested them. From the very air, or perhaps by drawing deeply on the unsubmicals within the ground itself, twin vats of pristine, hard granite rose, smooth-sided and impossibly uniform, appearing as if sculpted by a master craftsman in seconds. The laborious gasped, falling to their knees, murmuring prayers to Adlor, or perhaps to the new, terrifyingly capable child lord. Ezekiel ignored their prostrations. And for water removal, he continued, gesturing towards the now solidified vats, we need hydraulic presses for fiber compaction. And thermal drying racks for moisture evaporation. With another flash of golden light from his small hands, a series of gleaming, impossibly precise metal frames materialized within the mill. They formed a large, flat pressing bed, complete with a massive, overhead screw mechanism designed to apply immense pressure. Nearby, long, slender racks of a heat-resistant, unknown material unfolded, stretching across the floor. These were not crafted by hammer and forge, they were assembled from the raw components of the ether, their molecular structures perfectly replicated and arranged by Ezekiel's will. He even created a small, enclosed steam generator for the thermal drying, producing a steady, controlled heat that defied the laws of their traditional firemaking. One of the laborers, a man named Finn, finally found his voice. Lord Ezekiel, where did these machines come from? They are unlike anything I've ever seen. And the stone, it was crumbling moments ago. Ezekiel looked up, a faint annoyance crossing his face. Molecular replication and particle conversion, FIN. It's simply a more efficient construction methodology. Traditional manual labor is too time-intensive for critical infrastructure deployment. Also, I need a place for effluent dispersal, so we're going to redirect this river arm with an earth manipulation subroutine. With a wave of his hand, the river outside seemed to subtly shift course, a new, deep channel forming as if the earth itself simply decided to move, leading away from the mill to a dedicated wastewater management area. Finn, now trembling, pointed at a set of impossibly sharp, gleaming blades that had just materialized near one of the vats. And, these axes? And saws? They look like they could cut through anything. Precision cutting tools for biomass processing, Ezekiel explained. Standard issue for a modern forestry operation. The ones you brought are inefficient. Low torque output and prone to material fatigue. He then directed the bewildered laborers to begin clearing the interior debris, explaining, we need optimal workflow efficiency and personnel safety within the processing environment. Clear all non-essential physical obstacles. By the end of the day, the old mill was transformed. What had been a ruin was now a functional, if somewhat bewildering, paper production module, gleaming with new stone, strange metal machinery, and a meticulously redirected river. Ezekiel, covered in a fine dust but gleaming with satisfaction, looked at his handiwork. 3 days? More like 1. Efficiency achieved. Now, to wait for the lumberjacks and their biomass input. He suppressed a yawn. My meat suit requires recharge cycle, he mumbled, already envisioning his lucid sleep. He briefly considered replicating a few sheets of paper now, just to test the process. But no. The workflow protocol dictated that the raw materials be processed through the factory. He would endure the process, for scientific rigor. And because, even with his vast powers, he wanted to ensure the Viridians could, eventually, replicate at least some parts of the process, even if they never quite grasped the molecular replication part. He chuckled softly. The future of Viridia's information architecture looked bright. As the sun began its descent, casting long, purple shadows over the newly revitalized mill, one of the general laborers, a kindly old man named Old Man Theo, paused his sweeping. He sighed, looking towards the fading light, and clasped his calloused hands. Blessings upon us, Adlaw, for this bountiful day, Theo murmured, his voice a low, habitual drone of prayer. May your light guide us safely home, and keep our kin from harm. Ezekiel, who had been meticulously inspecting the effluent dispersal channel, froze. He turned, his golden eyes narrowing. He strode towards Old Man Theo with the purposeful gait of a CEO addressing a non-compliant employee, though his small legs meant he had to power walk rather than stride. Hold, Old Man Theo, Ezekiel commanded, his voice clear and unexpectedly firm for a child. Theo, startled, stopped his prayer mid-sentence, looking bewildered at the small lord. Lord Ezekiel. Theo stammered, his eyes wide. Your divine protocol adherence is inaccurate, Ezekiel stated, folding his small arms across his chest. Adlaw is a local light source provider. A sub-entity within the universal system architecture. Your worship target is incorrect. Theo blinked, utterly baffled. But Adlaw is the sun, young lord. He brings the day. Our ancestors have always prayed to him. Historical user data is irrelevant in the face of current system updates, Ezekiel lectured, his tone devoid of malice, but brimming with the absolute conviction of scientific truth. The true universal creator entity is Xylos. She is the prime deity, the administrator of all cosmic processes, the one who orchestrated galactic formation and seeded all life systems. Adlaw is merely a solar energy module under her direct supervision. Old Man Theo's jaw dropped. He looked around nervously, as if expecting a bolt of lightning from the heavens, presumably from Adlaw, now demoted. The goddess Xylos? But we have never heard of such a goddess, young lord. Our priests have never spoken of her. Ignorance of system architecture does not negate system functionality, Ezekiel countered, tapping his temple. You witnessed her direct manifestation at the temple. You saw her broadcast interface. She explicitly demanded user adoration. Therefore, all worship requests should be redirected to her primary divine address. Theo's face crumpled in confusion. But if I pray to her, will Adlaw be angry? Will he turn off the sun? Ezekiel sighed, an exasperated puff of air. Adlaw cannot turn off the sun, Theo. He is the sun. He is a pre-programmed celestial function. His operational parameters are set by Xylos. You should be grateful for his thermal output, but your worship bandwidth should be allocated to the prime deity. He paused, then softened his tone slightly, remembering his Xylos appeasement objective. She is very sensitive to user feedback. Positive praise input increases her divine processing power, which benefits us all. Adlaw doesn't require user input for his daily operational cycle. Theo stared at the small lord, then up at the darkening sky, a profound sense of bewilderment washing over him. He had always known the world was vast, but now it seemed his entire understanding of the cosmos had been dismantled by a 6-year-old. So, I should pray to the goddess Xylos, then? For my family's safety? For a good harvest? For everything, Theo, Ezekiel affirmed. She is the root administrator. All requests should go to her. It is more efficient. Now, if you will excuse me, my meat suit requires recharge cycle. He turned, leaving the old man standing in silent, cosmic re-evaluation, clutching his broom like a lifeline. Ezekiel suppressed a yawn. My meat suit requires recharge cycle, he mumbled, already envisioning his lucid sleep. He briefly considered replicating a few sheets of paper now, just to test the process. But no. The workflow protocol dictated that the raw materials be processed through the factory. He would endure the process, for scientific rigor. And because, even with his vast powers, he wanted to ensure the Viridians could, eventually, replicate at least some parts of the process, even if they never quite grasped the molecular replication part. He chuckled softly. The future of Viridia's information architecture looked bright.